Aloha, geek fans. Welcome back. It's time for Geeks at the Movies doing another in-depth review. Today, we're doing an in-depth review of The Last Samurai. This is where we give you both a little bit of film criticism and a history lesson all rolled into one. My name's Shane Goodrich, and I'm joined by Rachel McLeod.
Konnichiwa.
And let's get right to it with The Last Samurai. The Last Samurai tells the story of Tom Cruise. He's a veteran of the Indian Wars in the West. He fought against the Sioux, and now he's been contracted by the Japanese to help put down the last remnants of the samurai rebellion. Japan's trying to move into the modern age of those bad samurai. They're holding them back. Rachel, why did you pick this film?
Yeah. Well, much like The Patriot, I thought it would be a very good-looking film. I thought it would give me a good taste and good picture of early Meiji Restoration era Japan. And for the most part, it gave me that. It gave me some good taste, good flavor. But I think as soon as I watched the movie, I really got into it. That flavoring had a very sour taste to it. As soon as you get into the history of the story, as soon as you realize that the history takes a very far back seat, it kind of loses me. As a historian, it loses me. But first, let me tell you about some of the good parts. Yes, this movie was directed by Edward Zwick, who also filmed Glory. So in a sense, we do get some wonderful scenery. We get some wonderful pictures, costuming. We get some wonderful details. It's filmed very beautifully. And it does give me a good impression that, hey, this is Japan. This is, the early comings of their modernization, their early westernized Japan. We're seeing it. And the story development, the character development is excellent when it comes to, seeing some of the main characters, like Tom Cruise as Nathan Alrgren, who is like this washed up veteran of the Indian Wars. First he's introduced as a sort of a drunk character who's kind of disillusioned and falls kind of on the wayside, and
he's ashamed about his role in the
right.
wars.
He's committed some atrocities, or he's witnessed atrocities against the Native Americans, and it's kind of really impacted him psychologically, and he's kind of taken up to drinking and basically falling as a never-do-well. But then he's given the promise of a new adventure and maybe a chance to pick his feet up and get back into life if he takes on this commission by the Japanese emperor to basically help him suppress a samurai rebellion in a Japan that is desperate to westernize and desperate to modernize. So in terms of character development, okay, you got me. I really enjoyed the character development. I liked seeing this guy go from, his past, trying to discover himself and try to reinvent himself in this new context, in this new adventure. But so much of the story depends on the history being accurate and the timelines being accurate, and that's where it falls apart. What do you think?
Well, so yes, the film looks good. Right away, when we first see Japan, we eye Japan, we see a country in transition. We see the strange mixture of traditional Japanese clothing with Western clothing. We see people wearing kimonos, but they have top hats on. It's very odd. All from a distance, everything looks great. Yeah. The battles are very well shot. Some of them are very exciting. A lot of the acting is well done for what's happening on the screen. I buy into it. Yeah. I like a lot of the Japanese characters. Ken Watanabe is Katsumoto. He plays the lead samurai who's in rebellion against the emperor, but he's also siding with the emperor. It's a little confusing, but they go into that in the story. Tom Cruise, though, clearly is at the heart of this movie. It's a character discovery, kind of a journey of discovering himself. So all this superficially is fine.
Right.
But we're going to get to Tom Cruise in a moment, because I have lots of thoughts on Tom Cruise.
Yeah, brace yourself.
Brace yourself, yes. But getting into the actual history of Japan at this time, there is just so many issues. Yeah. I mean, right from the very first time we're introduced to the samurai, and this is the way they talk about the samurai. They talk about them as being these masters of warfare for the last 1,000 years, except Japan, until very recently, was a country at peace for hundreds of years. Right. Over 200 years, the country was at peace and had no significant wars. Samurai were bureaucrats. They were administrators. They weren't these warriors. That's a mythos that had long passed. Yeah. And also, the idea that the samurai, we don't disgrace ourselves by using firearms, that's ridiculous. That's complete nonsense.
They were using firearms as early as when the Chinese discovered black powder. I mean, they've been using rifles. They've been using fire weapons.
Fire weapons.
This is how much the movie.
I got myself a fire weapon.
I know. This is how much the movie really affected us. It's got us thinking backwards again. But that's just it. this movie does kind of force you to think backwards in so many ways because they really bastardized the timeline of this movie. For example, by the time Tom Cruise's character sets foot on Yokohama Harbor, the shogunate was already ousted. The Tokugawa period is over. It's done. It was done in 1867. It was done. Done.
And the shogun, just for those who might not know, was the person that actually was the de facto ruler of Japan.
The military leader.
He was the military leader, but he was also the real leader of Japan for almost 250 years. And the emperor, who always had a ceremonial role as leader, kind of like today's the British monarchy, where you have the queen, but she's ceremonial, but the prime minister is a real political leader. This is kind of how the situation in Japan was for hundreds of years, and now the emperor has regained real power, and the shogun's forces have been pushed aside, and the samurai class, which is kind of an aristocratic class, they've been demolished. It's no longer a thing.
As a warrior class, they're done. There's no fighting left over.
Yes.
So just to give you an idea of the timeline here, 1867 is when the Meiji emperor acceded his throne. And at 1868, the Meiji Restoration, which was to establish that the emperor was the true power of Japan, the shoguns are done. Tokugawa out. It occurred in 1 year.
Yes.
Now, when Tom Cruise sets his foot on Japan, that's in 1876. At least 10 years later.
Yes.
So the shogun are primarily obsolete by then. If there's any rebellion, it's going to be piddly little rebellions.
Yes.
The main crux of the fighting is over and done with. The issues have already been mostly resolved.
Right.
Now, the other thing that kind of ticks me off about the history of the thing is, as a storyline, this was supposed to be the story of a French captain who does the same job as Tom Cruise, basically teaching the Imperial Army how to modernize themselves and how to adopt Western military tactics. But for the purpose of our movie, they've Americanized that story. Instead of introducing a French, real true-to-life character, the real historical figure, they can say, no, we don't want to do it with a French guy. We're going to introduce an American captain who's going to do the same role, same thing, but for American audiences, we're going to placate to you and give you an American character. Much in the same way, with Ken Watanabe's character, he's based on a true-life samurai rebel, Saigo Takamori. And unfortunately, they've also bastardized his character.
Right, he led the Satsuma Rebellion in 1877.
Right, and they kind of bastardized that storyline to where they've softened Saigo.
They bastardize all the storylines.
Right.
Everything's confusing. Everything's a jumble. It's all just it's muddled. It's confusing. They get from a distance. Everything seems pretty good. It's like this is fairly accurate. But when you zoom in on any detail, it just breaks down. Another problem is they introduce you to the samurai village, and it's this idealized kind of military encampment.
It's a fairy tale.
Yeah, it's a fairy tale that never actually existed in the first place, but maybe a form of it existed at some point. But by this period, no way.
It's like walking into a time machine that went too far back.
Yes.
This is definitely it's a wonderful picture of a pre-modern samurai encampment, if that. It's
Right.
not really a village. It's more like an encampment. It's like a military encampment. You do get like an idealized folklore, fairy tale-ish image of the samurai. Here's the ideal blacksmith with carving up swords, and here's they're training with their wooden swords and this and that.
Yeah, they're
It
trying
looks like it should be, but it's not.
But it's
for
not,
that time
right.
period.
Exactly. If you didn't know better, you'd go, wow, this looks authentic. It looks like they got the details right. The samurai, for example, some of the interesting characteristics that seem odd but are true to life is the flags they wear on their backs. That seems very strange from someone from Western perspectives. Like, did they really wear those flags in the back in the battle? Yes, they actually did. So that's kind of cool how they showed that aspect. But then the armor they're wearing is much flashier than it would have been. It's ceremonial armor. They get a lot of the smaller details wrong, and it's annoying. And another thing is they also kind of throw in some tropes. They throw in the ninja. It's in Japan, so we have to have ninja.
Right.
The ninja were long gone. By this time period, the ninja had been gone for probably hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Their heyday was back during the Sengoku period, which was 300 years beforehand, when the whole country was in civil war.
Right.
And even their portrayal of the ninjas is a little bit it's anachronistic for sure because it's in the 1870s. But even that classic look of the ninja, the black outfit, and they're coming together in some covert mission to attack the samurai base. that's a little silly. That's not quite what the ninja were.
It was so heavy-handed Hollywood too.
Yes, exactly. It was heavy-handed Hollywood. They had to find an excuse for Tom Cruise's character, who gets captured by Katsumoto, Ken Watanabe's character. They need to have an excuse to bring them together.
Right, to win each other's trust.
Right, so during this battle, when the ninja come and attack this encampment of theirs, they fight off the ninja together, and now they trust each other. Right. And now Tom Cruise, which I want to start bringing Tom Cruise in this, he gets drawn in, and he again is playing that great white savior kind of role. He becomes a samurai. He becomes a fantastic samurai,
right.
And I just found this completely aggravating. Right. When I first saw him don the samurai armor towards the end, I wanted to blow my brains out. It was embarrassing. I was embarrassed to watch this. It just seemed silly and ridiculous.
This became a very fabricated movie. The reason why they did the things that they did was to heighten the contrast and really force the themes.
Yes.
This is a very thematic movie, much in the way that The Patriot was a thematic movie, where we want to show off the antiquated versus the modern.
Yes.
East meets West.
But it's not reality.
Old school samurai that we know from fairy tales versus the Western imperialist army influenced by the Americans, to give us the kind of guilt trip that the Americans were really the nasty imperialists and capitalists that we really actually are. But in any event, they did it for contrast, not for accuracy purposes. And it was just to heighten the story. The reason why we have the ninjas is so that we could get this plot point forward.
Yes. And I also just didn't, in addition to Tom Cruise, who by the way, I just did not like his performance throughout this film. Right from the very first time we see him when he's drunk, I found him aggravating, mm-hmm. I found him annoying, and I found that he just generally stuck out. In every scene he was in, I felt like he stuck out, like all the other actors are acting, they're interacting, they're having this believable interaction, and then here's Tom Cruise doing Tom Cruise action star. Yeah. And I hate Tom Cruise action star. I'm just not a big fan of Tom Cruise and that style. It annoys me, and it felt out of place for this movie. This movie could have been a serious drama that talked about the issues of Japan being opened up into the West in a more serious way, in a more realistic and grounded way. But by bringing Tom Cruise in, it's kind of like Mel Gibson with The Patriot. It just turns into kind of a dumb action film, which I felt it could have been so much more than that. Yeah. I think a lot of the Japanese actors here, they were really taking this seriously and trying to elevate the movie. But Tom Cruise, I felt every time I saw him, I cringed. It just didn't seem right. It didn't feel right.
There were moments where I felt like he's in character, out of character, in character, out of character, in character, out of character. Where he's out of character is like some of those cutesy scenes where he's teaching these young Japanese boys how to play baseball.
Or when he puts on the kimono the first time, he's kind of dancing around.
He's like dancing and posing in a kimono for the first time, trying to get this sense like, look at me, I'm Mr. Samurai now.
It's silly. And then I really very much disliked the relationship that he had with Katsumoto's sister, Taka. Yeah. So after, Tom Cruise gets captured in a battle early in the film, and he ends up killing Taka's husband. And for whatever reason, Ken Watanabe, Katsumoto, decides, hey, let's put your husband's killer, let's have him live with you.
Right.
And eventually, beyond all reason, she falls in love with the guy, and I never found it convincing. No. I mean, that's a problem I had with this film throughout. I just didn't believe what I was seeing. I just didn't believe what was happening. The final heroic battle at the end, to me, it fell flat. It looked good, visually stunning. Tom Cruise, he gets some revenge on a commanding officer he didn't like. But it just, everything fell flat. I didn't like Tom Cruise's performance. I didn't like the direction the movie took. And this is surprising because Edward Zwick, who directed the '89 film Glory, which we both reviewed,
we really liked it.
We gave it positive reviews. I see elements of Glory here. I mean, it has the rousing score and some visual set pieces that are pretty good, but the details all fall apart. Part of it's because of Tom Cruise. He's no Denzel Washington.
Right. He's certainly not a Morgan Freeman.
Right. He's got they had a stronger core acting cast. The Japanese actors, some of them are quite good, but they're always to the side. They're always side characters to me. Even Katsumoto, the leader of the Samurai Rebellion, he's just a side character. He plays second fiddle to Tom Cruise. Overall, I had a lot of problems with this movie. Well, why don't you give you some closing thoughts and give me a score?
Yeah. Well, closing thoughts were, I did like the character development. if you don't take the movie that seriously, you can get into the story of this character's transformation, and you will get swept away by the scenery. Even though and this is disappointing to me, this film was filmed in New Zealand for the most part, but also the village scenes were filmed in a backlot at Warner Brothers Studio, Burbank, California.
No surprise. What's your score?
3. 3
Wow,
out of 5.
Wow, that's really generous. I'm giving this 2 stars. I was thinking about giving it 1. But again, if you're not tied into the history, which these reviews are about people that are interested in the history, but if you're not really tied into that, you could probably watch this as a reasonable action film.
Yeah.
I enjoyed some of the battles. It was cool. It was cool seeing some of the fight scenes. I enjoyed the general picture, but overall, this movie's got a lot of flaws. So I'm giving it 2 stars, and you're giving it 3 stars.
Yeah, if they gave it more of the history, paid more attention to the history, I would have given it a higher score. But I did like the story. I did like the character development.
Well, you liked it more than me. Either way, stay tuned. We're going to be doing more in-depth reviews where we give you film criticism and a history lesson all rolled into one. My name's Shane Goodrich. This is
Rachel McLeod.
And we've been Geeks of the Movies.
Sayonara.